The goal of public speaking is to gain a desired response from listeners, but not at any cost. That brings us to ethics. Ethics is defined as the branch of philosophy that deals with issues of right and wrong in human affairs. Now, in an ideal world, every public speaker would be truthful and devoted to the good of society. However, we are faced with ethical issues at every stage of the speech-making process. Ethical decisions are sound ethical decisions that involve weighing a potential course of action against a set of ethical standards and guidelines. Your ethical decisions will be guided by your own values, your conscience, and your sense of right and wrong. Now here's some guidelines for ethical speaking. First, you want to make sure that your goals are ethically sound. So what's an example of a speech with a goal that's not ethically sound? Maybe how to make a fake ID, or how to illegally download information from the internet. Things like that. If it's not an ethical information that you're presenting, you probably don't want to present it for this class. Another guideline is to be fully prepared for each speech. Failure to be adequately prepared may lead you to give incorrect information. You also want to investigate the whole story by learning about all sides of an issue, seeking out competing viewpoints, and getting all of your facts right. You also want to be honest in what you say. Now, this goes beyond telling flat-out lies. Don't juggle statistics, quote out of context, misrepresent facts and figures, offer tentative findings as firm conclusions, portray a few details as the whole story, cite unusual cases as typical examples, or substitute rumors and half-truths as evidence and proof. A few other guidelines is that you want to avoid name-calling and other forms of abusive language. Name-calling is the use of language to defame, demean, or degrade individuals or groups. Avoiding racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic, and other types of abusive language is not just a matter of political correctness. Such language is ethically suspect because it devalues the person or group in question and stereotypes them in ways that assumes one group is subordinate to another. You also want to put ethical principles into practice. Being ethical means behaving ethically all the time, not only when it's convenient. Now we'll learn about plagiarism, another thing that ethical students need to think about. Plagiarism is presenting another person's language or ideas as your own. It gives the impression that something is original when really it's not. The word actually comes from the Latin word for kidnapper. We'll go over the three major types of plagiarism: global, patchwork, and incremental. The first is global plagiarism. This is stealing a speech entirely from a single source and passing it off as one's own. Now, this is the most blatant form of plagiarism and completely inexcusable. It usually comes from desperation, needing a speech at the last minute. The best way to combat global plagiarism is to start preparing your speech early, giving you plenty of time to go do your own research. Next is patchwork plagiarism. This is stealing ideas or language from 2 or 3 sources and passing them off as your own. Now, copying word for word from a few sources is no less plagiarism than copying it all from a single source. You also have incremental plagiarism. This is failing to give credit for a particular part of a speech that's borrowed from other people. This is where quotations come in. Now, when you quote someone directly, you must attribute their words. You can also paraphrase. This is restating or summarizing an author's words. You must attribute paraphrases the same way that you would quotations. Now, to avoid incremental plagiarism, Be sure to take careful notes to distinguish between your ideas and someone else's. And when in doubt, always cite the source. Plagiarism and the internet is a different issue. When you cite internet sources, you want to make sure you do it the same way you would a print source. Give the complete information, not just on the internet, or I found this on the internet site. You also want to make sure you take careful notes, again, to avoid unintentional incremental plagiarism. Speaking of ethics, speakers aren't the only ones in the speech communication process that have ethical obligations. As speech making is a two-way street, listeners also have some ethical obligations. And here are some guidelines for ethical listening. You want to make sure that you are courteous and attentive to the speaker. Avoid prejudging the speaker. Just because a person looks or sounds a certain way doesn't mean that their speech is going to be about what you think it's going to be about. You also want to maintain free and open expression of ideas.